Thank you. It's working and all good. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, ready.
So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about this topic and to participate in this wonderful international event. In my time zone, we are at just after 11, 11:15 Saturday morning, and I know you're at the end of a long day, so I'll proceed and then you can wrap up and do perhaps some other things today. This talk is about developing psychological workforce literacy in Australian students. And the co-authors are myself, Tanya Machin, who happens to be my wife, Natalie Gasson, Phoebe Bailey, and Chloe Maxwell-Smith. And we'll also hear from Phoebe and Chloe during the presentation. I have two recordings of them talking about the way they have designed their undergraduate course or unit degree to focus on this concept of developing psychological workforce literacy. We also acknowledge at the start of presentations the traditional custodians of the lands and waterways where our universities are located. And we further acknowledge the cultural diversity of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and pay respect to elders past, present, and future, and celebrate the continuous living cultures of First Australians and acknowledge the important contributions Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have made and continue to make in Australian society. This slide is just a picture of the edge of the escarpment. So Toowoomba is located on the top of an escarpment called the Great Dividing Range, which runs virtually all the way down the eastern coast of Australia, and that's looking out from the escarpment. So it just gives you an idea of the kind of place where I'm living at the moment in Toowoomba. I would just like to summarize what we're doing so there's some clarity and everyone is really on board with what it is I mean by these terms like psychological workforce literacy. So the goal is to help psychology students to be better placed to make career transitions as a result of the psychological workforce literacy that is intentionally developed in their degrees. So that's my main aim for this presentation. I also would like to paint a picture of what it would be like for psychology degrees to have this kind of intentional focus. So I'm asking you to imagine a psychology degree program, so particularly the undergraduate focus is where I'm focused at the moment, where all students are evaluated on their development of a career plan that incorporated their understanding of their own capacity to apply their learning in different contexts, which also enable their reflexivity to address any gaps in their learning. So this is the picture of a wonderful situation that we could achieve in undergraduate psychology training. Students who understand their own capacities to apply what they're learning in different contexts and also understand where that may be limited, where they have gaps, where they need to improve, and how to address those gaps. So that's my vision of what we're talking about here. So psychological workforce literacy, I believe, has been coined by Spencer in 2021 in an article, and really emphasizes this development of students' capabilities and confidence in their future career plans. So those two things are the two key components: understanding their capabilities and confidence in how to apply those capabilities in a range of situations. And we see this as a kind of psychological literacy, that broad concept that is being discussed in many areas and is becoming what I think is probably one of the dominant ways of thinking about developing students, psychology students. So this ability in is articulating and applying psychological knowledge, but it doesn't necessarily go and define every bit of knowledge and skill. It's actually the framework for how students can be progressively developed through an undergraduate sequence. So Spencer proposed this, and I have used the figure 1 from the Spencer article because it does highlight the entry point and the exit point. It highlights a sequence over a number of years that everyone who teaches undergraduate psychology is aware of, the key concepts that are being developed, how we ask students to envisage applying those in different contexts, thinking about where they're going to end up. So do they want to be fully registered and practicing in the profession, or do they want to be doing something else? What learning opportunities are being provided for them? And we often connect students with graduates, with alumni, as a way of trying to build that bridge between where they are in their undergraduate sequence and people who have progressed beyond that. So underpinning that, there can be experiential learning through volunteering or other service opportunities, doing mini research projects, etc. Individual mentoring from our experienced educators and faculty, and then the career focus, which is really critical in this psychological workforce literacy framework. So these kinds of units or courses, not sure everyone uses different terminology for them, but they're the individual subjects that students would take, might include introductory subjects with self-assessment, resume building, some experiential activities, getting students to interact together, self-awareness raising, as well as thinking about occupations where they might apply, more advanced activities, etc., guest lecturers, then moving through further reflection on what they've been learning, how that can be captured, particularly either in a resume or in some sort of e-portfolio or way of describing their learning experiences, with more planning, more interaction with alumni and faculty. Finally, through to the culmination where someone actually has a fairly clear understanding of what their career path might entail and how they would put that into place. So you can see it's progressive. It's a lot of activity, a lot of experiential activity, self-reflection, talking, thinking about the future, what their future self will be, and often like using terms like future self. You know, who do you want to be is often a question that we use with people who are in psychology training programs. Not just what do you want to do, but who do you want to be? What kind of person? What's your professional identity that you're developing, etc. So very, very interesting way of scaffolding the development of psychological workforce literacy. And what we're going to hear are two examples of, in Australia, how our psychology educators are trying to implement this kind of training. So the first of these approaches comes from Curtin University, and Chloe is teaching right at the beginning, the first year subjects in a psychology degree. So I'm going to just escape out of PowerPoint and come over to Chloe's presentation. So just bear with me for 1 second while I find that one. And we're now going to hear from Chloe Maxwell-Smith.
Hello, I'm Dr. Chloe Maxwell-Smith. I'm a lecturer in psychology at Curtin University. My teaching role has spanned a range of units from first year through to fourth year of our psychology degree. In the first year, this has involved coordination of a unit, Science and Professional Practice in Psychology, which is a core first-year unit that aims to communicate what scientific and professional practice may look like as a future psychologist, or if students choose to pursue a different career pathway. We use the Australian Handbook for Careers in Psychological Science as an essential textbook for this unit. The book informs students of a variety of pathways for study and work in psychology, including what postgraduate study could look like, along with the journey of becoming endorsed in psychological endorsement areas. The textbook really works as an important tool in this unit, along with other components of the unit, to increase psychological workforce literacy of students so that they're equipped early on in their academic careers to make well-informed choices about their study pathways. While these topics do arise later on in the degree as well, we find that many students entering their study in psychology appreciate having direction early on and are interested in the diverse range of possible directions that their study in psychology could facilitate. Specifically, the textbook equips students to be better prepared for entering the psychological workforce by drawing on some of the common threads throughout endorsement areas, such as the best practice in ethics as a psychologist and considerations for conducting and applying psychological research to that practice. This ties in closely with key topics explored in the first year of our course, including an understanding of the scientist practitioner model, which then they use as a guiding framework throughout the rest of their degree. So the goal is for this toolkit, including the textbooks, the handbook of careers in psychological science, is to really equip students to apply and articulate principles learned in psychology to a future career within or beyond psychology.
Thank you, Chloe. Can I just double check that has been audible and understandable to everyone before we move on? Was that okay? Can someone respond, please?
Yes, it was fine. It was good. Thank you, Tony.
Oh, thank you very much, Jackie. Okay, so the next presenter. So I'll briefly go back to the slides, and then we'll hear from our next presenter. Is from the University of Technology, Sydney, and her name is Phoebe Bailey, and she's going to be talking to us about also this resource that we've developed called the Australian Handbook for Careers in Psychological Science, and how that's used in their undergraduate and graduate program as well. So we're now going to hear from Phoebe Bailey. And just give me a second while I reshare the screen. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Phoebe, and I'm going to provide a brief overview of how we use the Australian Handbook for Careers in Psychological Science as a prescribed text. Our UTS Honours equivalent grad dip in Psychology Advanced includes a 6-week fully online psych science career readiness subject, and the aim of the subject is to help students understand the diverse career pathways available to them, as well as how to be most competitive for their chosen career. Students begin by completing 2 surveys, assessing first their career preparation self-efficacy, and second, their knowledge of psychology career information. This is followed up with feedback, as well as content from the handbook consisting of podcasts, videos, and readings intended to provide psychology career inspiration. In addition to information about different career options, we also provide students with information on various postgraduate study options, including training for alternative helping professions such as social work and counselling, or for higher degree research. The section on postgrad psychology training includes reference to Chapter 5 of the handbook, which explains the clinical psychologist pathway. Assessment 1 is an early low stakes assessment, and you can see the subject learning objectives here demonstrate knowledge of diverse psychological science career pathways and analyse academic and career plans based on accurate assessment of key required attributes. So the assessment involves identifying 5 non-psychologist job options or 5 future study options for a student who's completing a psychology degree. Students are also required to identify key attitudes or attributes that an interview panel member might look for in an applicant for one of those jobs or programs, and then also some potential interview questions. Students then reflect on how an understanding of self-determination theory might guide their career decision-making. And this assessment is partly scaffolded by Chapter 1 of the text, which includes details about broad and targeted search strategies, as you can see here on this slide. And the text also includes information about how psychology degrees directly address many of the top-rated attributes desired by employers. Assessment 3 subject learning objectives include create a resume or CV that showcases typical skill sets employers desire in psychology graduates, develop a presentation that strengthens preparation for job entry or postgrad admission, and offer constructive feedback on a communication project. The assessment involves creation of a CV tailored to a specific master's program or psychology relevant job. Students also create a 2-minute video recorded answer to an interview question and provide a written self-review and peer review of the interview response. For scaffold assessment 3, students review the Australian Government's core skills for work developmental framework, including factors that influence work performance. We integrated an activity from Chapter 2 of the text that asks students to reflect on their core work skills. Students then complete activities that involve identifying their transferable skills and creating powerful statements that provide evidence for these skills. There's a further section from the text that helps students to understand the value of ongoing reflection and the types of questions they should be considering as they reflect on new learning experiences. So students are asked to share whether reflection on their skills, personality, values and interests throughout the subject, which we do in collaboration with UTS Careers, has changed their thinking about which career path to take. The final modules in this subject incorporate components of the text that contribute to practical skills required for career development, such as how to analyse workforce trends and how to request a letter of recommendation. And we also plan to use the handbook in a career readiness subject in the second year of our new Bachelor of Psychology and Bachelor of Psychology Honours degrees commencing at UTS next year. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Phoebe, for sharing that information about those subjects in their grad dip and the Bachelor of Psych Honours that is being developed. Okay. 1 or 2 seconds while I move back to the original presentation and then happy for any questions. So hopefully you can now see the slides where I'm going to briefly outline the handbook that both of those presenters spoke about. So we have a free and open resource that's an adaptation of the Canadian Handbook for Careers in Psychological Science. So 15 chapters have been adapted for the Australian context. At the end of June 2023, over 20,000 views, quite a lot of downloads from all over the world. And interestingly, our chapter on psychology and law in Australia was the most downloaded chapter at that point. So this handbook had a number of goals, and one of the key goals was around helping evaluate the impact of career resources, interventions, or various activities on students' work readiness and career outcomes. But you can see the other goals that are listed there as well. We've recently added a chapter which makes it a complete set now around neuroscience and careers, with new chapters being considered as well on important topics like cybersecurity and the role of psychology in this space. So, as I said, free and open. If you want the slides later, I'll give you a link and that'll have access to everything. I just want to conclude with a few ideas around what we are also doing in addition to building resources that are valuable for undergraduate psychology students, like that careers handbook. So we've been focusing on how you measure undergraduate capabilities, because this is a very important part of, I think, the development of psychological workforce literacy. We didn't develop the employable skills self-efficacy scales. That came from Sirocco and Stromitz. So we've looked at using these measures, which cover 4 domains with subscales listed next to each domain. But the 4 key broader domains are communication, analytical inquiry, collaboration, and professional development. At the same time, we've worked to validate scenarios which we are aiming to use as measures of psychological literacy, and the group, the whole pool of items, and are called the test of psychological literacy. They fall into actually 13 domains, and the ones that we've been focusing on to date are research methods, abnormal psychology, developmental psychology, social psychology, and the research methods one I just mentioned. So that article is actually out now, and you can access that by clicking on the link, or if you have any challenges getting it, just let me know and I'll give you a copy of it. Finally, we've been thinking about generative AI and how that impacts on this concept of measuring things like psychological literacy, or how students are responding to scenarios that might test their understanding and application of psychological concepts. And because of the tools that have become available, we've decided to compare how well generative AI can understand and respond to those kinds of scenarios. So using items from the test of psychological literacy, we've asked ChatGPT, and in this case it was version 3.5, the free research version, to respond, first of all, to the scenarios in the open response format, not the structured responses, the situational judgment items. But we've also compared how ChatGPT rates the prepared responses that we've got from subject matter experts as well. And it has the capability to respond well according to our understanding of psychological literacy. So generative AI is really going to help us accelerate, I think, some of the development of ways of capturing people's understanding, or students' understanding in particular, of the application of psychological knowledge. So it can certainly do this in one domain, which is the research methods domain, and potentially generalize across multiple domains of psychological literacy. Remember, I said there were about 13 domains. We've focused on 4 so far, and we've been using ChatGPT, particularly in one of those areas, and looking at how well it responds to those scenarios. So it will be impacting on the kind of development of our test of psychological literacy in the future. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for paying attention. There is a URL and a QR code for anyone who's interested in accessing the presentation, both of those will lead you to the slides, which you can download with links embedded in them. So you'll be able to find all of those things if you are interested. Now,